Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to talk about Trump's latest Truth Social post where he flips out over the Ukraine conflict, and we're going to talk about the neoliberal big beautiful bill. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to talk about Donald Trump's latest, I guess, Truth Social post and just some stuff that's going on with Trump these days. So let's get rolling. I better do something here. I've got something on my other screen that's distracting me. All right, so Donald Trump, let's start here. There's a Truth Social post, and let's see if I can find the whole thing. Here we go. Let's read it. And a lot of people have talked about it, where basically the Russians struck a gigantic missile / drone strike on Ukraine, and Trump apparently was upset. What happened was, within the last several days, the Ukrainians launched a massive drone strike around Russia. And then Russia launched a lot of missile and drone strikes against Ukraine. Now, the Russians have claimed that it was retaliatory, but I don't really think so. I don't really think it was retaliatory, because the nature of Russian military strategy is not to be reactive. The nature of Russian military strategy, that, if you understand the Russian culture as it was, and I think this is part of the Russian culture, it's very bureaucratic. It's very, this is what we do, and this is why we do it, and this is our reasoning for doing it, and doing it. And Vladimir Putin, I mean, they do some retaliation, I think, here and there, but for the most part, I think Vladimir Putin has kind of left things to the military, and they decide upon their targets and strike them. And I believe it wasn't retaliatory, but it, the Russians said it was, whatever. That's part of the war game. We understand people in war say different things for different reasons. But one of the things that, as an example, one of the things that the Russians struck was a major, apparently a drone factory in Kiev. And one of the things they struck was a Patriot missile battery. So I doubt very seriously if it was retaliatory to strike those, what would be called legitimate and military targets, and very inviting military targets, I might add. If you find out where they are and you're in a military conflict, you're probably going to fire at them. There's going to be no retaliation, no impetus needed for retaliation for targets of that nature. So here's my point. And this is my point. This is a military conflict, right? That's what it is. It's a military conflict, right? And to me, Trump saying, "Oh my gosh, the Russians have launched military strikes in a military conflict," is kind of like watching a boxing match. And you're trying. You don't like boxing. You don't like this boxing match. You don't want this boxing match to go on for whatever reason. And one guy, right? And you say to yourself, "Hey, what are you doing punching that guy? You could hurt somebody. This is madness." Well, it's not really madness, because that's the nature of boxing. If people weren't getting punched, it wouldn't be a boxing match. It would be a ballet. It would be the Bolshoi ballet. And the Bolshoi ballet, nobody gets punched. People dance. But if you go to a boxing match and you're watching a boxing match, fist will be thrown. So let's talk about Trump's Truth Social post. I've always had and so when I read it, let's take it apart a little bit and see what we can maybe find from it. See what we can deduce, shall we say. We will use our deductive reasoning to try to figure out Trump's Truth Social post, rather than look at it in the aggregate and accept it in a big manner. Oh, Trump's angry at Putin, or he's angry at somebody else. Let's go line by line. Let's pick it apart, see what we get. Donald J. Trump. First sentence. I've always had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin of Russia, but something has happened to him, right? So he's saying, I've had a good relationship with Vladimir Putin. Okay, that's clear where he's going with that. Got a good relationship with Putin. Something has happened to him. In other words, he's lost it. He has gone absolutely crazy, and crazy is in large letters. So that implies that his actions are irrational, that these are actions that are not normal. I've had a good relationship with him, but, which means but, right? Something has happened, something has changed. He's gone crazy. It implies that this is not rational, that he's not thinking his way through this. He is needlessly killing a lot of people, and I'm not just talking about soldiers. So now what's he saying? He's lost his mind and he's killing civilians. Now, here's the reality. One may look at that and ask, why do we not see that kind of passion in Gaza? Why do we not see that kind of passion in Syria? Why do we not see that kind of passion in anywhere else? Right? For some reason, Donald Trump has great passion for the needless civilians being killed in Ukraine, but nowhere else. Maybe South African farmers that aren't even really being killed, right? But my point being that his point is something has happened to Putin. He's become irrational. So I had a good relationship with him. That implies that Putin was rational. Now something's happened. He's become irrational and he's killing innocent people. Missiles and drones are being shot into cities in Ukraine for no reason whatsoever that doesn't acknowledge military targets, right? Again, he's a madman. There's no reason. It's totally irrational. I've always said he wants all of Ukraine, every bit, not just a piece of it. And maybe that's proving to be right. Again, he's rambling on. It seems to me that the push-pull, right? Maybe that, so he starts off with, I've had a good relation with him. That's one side. That implies he's a perfectly good, rational guy. But something has happened to him that improved. He's irrational. I've always said he wants all of Ukraine, not just a piece of it. And maybe that's proving to be right. Now let's think about that. He says, I've always said something. Maybe it's right. Well, that implies this, that I wasn't confident when I said it, that maybe that was wrong. I said he wants all of Ukraine. Maybe that's proving to be right. What you're saying is, I said something, maybe it's still, he didn't say that's proving to be right. Maybe it's proving to be right. That implies that it wasn't right, that he still doesn't have confidence that it's true. You know, I've always said that whatever it is, I've always said that Joe is an idiot, and maybe he actually is. That implies that I didn't have confidence when I said that, and I still don't have confidence because I'm saying maybe. I've always said this. Maybe it's proving to be right. I don't have a lot of confidence in what I said. Right? Okay. If he does, now wait a minute. I've always said that he wants to take all of Ukraine. Maybe it's right. If he does, here's what he's saying. I said something that may not be true. I don't have confidence in what I said being true. Right? I wouldn't say maybe. What I'd say is this. I've always said that he wants all of Ukraine because it's true. I know he wants all of Ukraine. I wouldn't say I've always said he wants all of Ukraine and maybe it's true. But if it is, a lot of trepidation. I've said something and I don't have confidence that it's true. It even implies that I don't believe that it's true. It will lead to the downfall of Russia, whatever that means. Likewise, also, additionally, in the same manner, President Zelensky is doing his country no favors by talking the way he does. Everything out of his mouth causes problems. I don't like it and it better stop. Here's what's interesting. Putin's doing bad, but so is Zelensky. And here's what's interesting. He doesn't say anything specific about Zelensky. In fact, he says everything out of his mouth causes problems. I don't like it and it better stop. Interesting. So here's what I read from that. He starts off by saying, you know, I like Putin, but he seems to have lost his mind. He seems to have gone crazy. He's doing something irrational. I've always said he wanted Ukraine, take all of Ukraine, but maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't really know. I've just said it. If he does, hey, look, he better not try to take all of Ukraine or it's going to work bad for him, right? Now, Zelensky, too. Let's not leave him out. Everything out of his mouth is bad. Nothing specific when it says Zelensky. What does that tell me? This is my interpretation. I've said something bad about Russia. Now I got to say something. I've said something bad about President Putin. Now I got to say something bad about Zelensky to even it out. Almost like he's speaking to an audience, and his audience, some of his audience is going to say, hey, you better talk bad about Putin. Some of his audience is going to say, yeah, you better talk bad about Zelensky, and I got to even this thing out. That's what I read from it. Maybe wrong. That's the way I interpret it. Now, what next? He's talked about Putin. He's talked about Zelensky. Now it's time to talk about himself. This is a war that would never have started if I were president. That's about me. I would have done things differently. That's what he says. I would have done things differently. I didn't get myself in this jam. Somebody else did. It's not my responsibility. This is Zelensky's, Putin's, and Biden's war, not Trump's. This ain't mine. I'm trying to navigate my way out of somebody else's mess. That's what he's saying. There's an argument to be made for that. There's an argument to be made against it, right? There's an argument to be made that this was part of the empire. This was part of the Ukraine project, was part of, we're going to take over Ukraine. We're going to destabilize Russia. Then we're going to, continue to dominate the world. Now, here's the hole in that. Here's the problem in that. What he's saying is, this is about people. I'm not going to acknowledge that this is a imperial project. I'm not going to acknowledge that this is a grand scheme to dominate the world. I'm going to say this is three people: Zelensky, Putin, Biden. These are people that did this. This is not a institutional problem. This is not about dominating the world. And the United States is as Zbigniew Brzezinski himself wrote, we'll break Russia up into three pieces, and then we'll attack China from three sides and tear it apart. And then we'll dominate and rule the world. We'll take apart. There's three world powers, and we'll destroy the other two, and we'll be the only world power. That's the diabolical and evil plan behind, underlining the Ukraine project. But what Donald Trump's saying is, I'm not going to acknowledge that. I'm going to make it people. Right? It's and that's what happens when people protect institutions. They make it about individuals. There are a few bad apples, right? There's always bad apples. What happened? A police department has been beating and shooting people mercilessly for decades. We got a few bad apples. Well, wait a minute. A few bad apples. There was cops that came, cops that have gone, and they're still doing that. That department is doing terrible things and has been for the last 30 years. A few bad apples. It implies that there's a few bad cops. If you get rid of those few bad cops, the entire department will be good. There's an institutional problem here, an institutional problem that says it's okay to use violence against civilians. It's okay to beat up people if you're a cop and you're angry at them, right? It's not an institutional problem. A few bad apples, a few individuals, not a grand scheme. Donald Trump. Hey, are we trying to overthrow the world and dominate and destroy Russia and China? No. Zelensky, Putin, Biden, those three guys have done something. They've make decisions to screw this up, right? Not my war. So it doesn't even acknowledge the existence of the empire and the impetus of imperialism, of the empire, of world domination. It doesn't even bring that into account. Last but not least, I am only helping to put out the big and ugly fires that have been started through gross incompetence and hatred, right? So what is he saying? Number one, exactly what I said. I'm trying to fix this. And they were starting through gross incompetence, people making mistakes, error, right? Bad decisions and hatred. He does acknowledge, and he's acknowledged recently, that the Ukrainians hate the Russians. Well, let's face it, Zelensky has said, I hate the Russians. So he acknowledges that there is hate. He then turns it, but this is not gross incompetence, is it? We know it's not gross incompetence. Look, Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote a book called The Grand Chessboard. Read it. Historically, the CIA has been in for decades have been in Ukraine, MI6 for decades, fomenting evil and violence against the Soviet Union and then the Russian Federation. This is not incompetence. This is an assertive decision that has been made to try to destabilize first the Soviet Union and then the Russian Federation. So my point is, he calls it incompetence, a refusal to acknowledge that the U.S. is an empire trying to dominate the world, and hatred. There is some level of acknowledgement that the Ukrainians hate the Russians. So that's where Donald Trump is. And that's one of the reasons that I referred to this as quicksand. That I referred to this because Donald Trump is trapped in quicksand. He wants out. Donald Trump is not an anti-imperialist that he wants the U.S. empire not to do imperial things, not to try to overrun the world or whatever. He just has a different plan. I think, quite frankly, Donald Trump's plan involves less violence and more bullying, economic bullying. Not saying that Donald Trump is not in favor of violence, that he won't, but I think Donald Trump, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, Donald Trump does not want a big war. He may want to threaten, but I don't think he wants a big war. I think Donald Trump is afraid. I think he's afraid there'll be a nuclear war. I think he's afraid personally that he'll be killed. And he's right, as we would all be killed in a personal war, but in a nuclear war. But I do think that he is just a different version of it, of this imperial machine that wants to, rule the world. He just has a different way of doing it. He sees it differently. It's more, interestingly enough, it's more intellectual than the neocons. Paradoxically, because Donald Trump is not an intellectual. There's a paradox here that Donald Trump's plan to rule the world could be more intellectually founded than the neocons. And here's what I mean. The neocons are knuckle dragging apes. And they're like, we're going to blow everything up. Oh, we need to put lots of missiles and bombs and everything in Asia so we can attack them and kill them all. Then we need to set up for the Russians. Oh, we need to fire more missiles into Russia. We need to do more kinetic warfare against Russia. We need to expand and kill more Russians. Donald Trump, more or less, is like, we need to figure out how we can dominate the region, how we can rebuild our economy, how we can continue to, extract stuff from other countries. We can push the little countries around and take all their resources. It's more thinking things out where you don't have to break everything in the China shop or from the perspective of the world, simply because he wants, I think Donald Trump is afraid of dying in a nuclear holocaust. Not that he is against using violence. I just think he has a greater propensity to use violence against smaller countries and to use bullying against smaller countries. And he doesn't really want war with a peer adversary or near peer adversary because he doesn't want the kinetic fallout, shall we say, from that. So it's a great paradox that Donald Trump, being an anti-intellectual, is still more of an intellectual than the neocons. It doesn't say anything about Donald Trump. It just tells you how how terrible, how evil, how brutal and violent the neocons really are. That Donald Trump is a pussycat beside these people, but he has the same goals and he wants to use evil machinations to get there. They're just not quite as violent. Isn't that interesting? Let's continue. Let's talk about Donald Trump feeding the war machine, right? Donald Trump and it's not just quicksand, it's neoliberal quicksand. And part of neoliberalism is, keep in mind, neoliberalism to me has a couple of, you could be very specific about the facets of neoliberalism, about the pillars of neoliberalism, but we don't always need to do that. We can bring in Dr. Jack Rasmus a little bit later this week. Maybe we'll talk to Dr. Jack Rasmus again this week and talk about that. But my point is, Neoliberalism is about domination and extraction, dominating people and extracting the assets of everything that you come around, of the of nature, of poor people, of working class people, of other country, extracting the assets of the people in your own country, extracting the assets of everyone you can in on behalf and putting them into the hands of a wealthy few. That's it. That's what it is. That's neoliberalism. And what's interesting is how many people, some people call it globalism. What's interesting is how many people actually support the policies of neoliberalism, yet they argue that they're anti, and they'll use the word globalist or neoliberal, whatever they are. They argue that they're opposed to it, and they support the very foundational policies of it. But let's look at a couple of things, right? Donald Trump, Mr. Neoliberal. He's one of the things that has become a pillar of neoliberalism in America is feeding the war machine, right? So here's what we have. Donald Trump, after coming in saying we've got to lay off workers, right? And I said, no, they're working class people. They were like, well, yeah, but they're bureaucrats. Well, wait a minute. If you're going to, the US government is going to spend money, would I rather that they spend $500 million on one B-2 stealth bomber, and that B-2 stealth bomber's job is when a nuclear war happens and bombs have been fired, missiles have been fired, right? That perhaps our enemies, some people may survive. And after the what do you call it? The missiles from the intercontinental missiles come in and kill everybody in the other country. Then you send in the B-2 stealth bombers in case some people have survived. You want to make sure all humans are dead. And even though nobody could possibly survive, anyway, you do it. And then you send them in, and then they blow everything up and make sure what you want to do is you want to make sure that no humans survive. Period. Point blank. No possibility any humans should survive. Now, ask Garland Nixon, should we spend $500 million on that, or should we spend it paying soccer moms who work for the Department of Education, for the Department of the Interior, for the Department of whatever, right? The Food and Drug Administration. Garland Nixon says, don't lay anybody else. Why are we spending $500 million on a plane that's designed to end humanity? Take that $500 million and spend it on the people who buy townhouses and cars and shoes and put their kids through college and things like that, right? If the U.S. government's going to spend money, you can call it government waste. I call it government spending. If the government's going to spend money, it's far more productive to put it into the hands of working class people than it is to waste it on the military industrial complex. So when Donald Trump came in, we've got to lay off all of these people. So he's laying off people, working class people, people, yay, he's getting rid of government waste. And I'm like, what did I say, if you remember? And not that I'm some kind of a genius. This is easy. I said, they're going to increase the military budget by more than they save from laying off the soccer moms at the Food and Drug Administration and the Department of Environment. So Donald Trump's big, beautiful budget, $150 billion in new money for the Defense Department and national security, $150 billion, far more money than they saved by laying off soccer moms, okay, and dads. $25 billion for Trump's Golden Dome for America. $25 billion for an absolute waste of money. A waste of money. For starters, what is this Golden Dome going to do? The United States doesn't even have a decent air defense system. The Patriot system, every time, I'll put it like this. In Ukraine, you can't turn it on. Because when you turn it on and the radar comes on and the Russians know where it is, they'll destroy it. They send missiles in, and the Patriot air defense system is unable to track and defend itself against the missiles, and it gets destroyed. In fact, that happened just the other day in Kiev, and the videos out there everywhere. You see the system, you see the Patriot system firing off missiles, and then you see it firing off all one missile after another, and then you see it get blown to hell. Blown to hell. The Russians, oh, there it is. Okay, here's your coordinates. Kablooey. So they're going to spend 150. What are they going to do? Buy a bunch of Patriot missile systems and set up a bunch of missile systems that can't protect themselves? Number one, I remember talking to a guy who was the head of the U.S. Physicist Society, and he was explaining why you can't have a missile defense shield. Based on the technology we have. Number one, it'd be too easy to spoof. All your enemies would have to do, or whoever is attacking you, is just send enough missiles. That's all. You remember, when a missile is incoming, you got to have 2 for 1. You got to have 2 for each. So all they'll have to do is send hundreds and hundreds of missiles that don't even have a warhead, and hundreds of missiles that do. And guess what happens? The incoming missiles first don't have warheads. Or some do, and a few do, and a few don't. And can your system determine which ones don't? Make them identical, and it'll spoof them. They can explode in midair and drop all kinds of fake missiles. You could have hundreds of missiles, and each of those missiles open and come while they're coming in, and split into 50 more missiles, 50 warheads. But half of those are nuclear armed, and half of them are duds. All you have to do is overwhelm and spoof the system. We saw that with how the Iranians attacked Israel. They overwhelmed, spoofed the system, and every actual missile they sent hit. So the bottom line is, the $25 billion Golden Dome for America is a $25 billion neoliberal boondoggle. It is what I said. They're throwing the money away. They laid off working class people, and now they're going to throw the money to hell. Next. $21 billion to restock the nation's ammunition arsenal. Where'd all of that money go? Where'd all our ammunition arsenal go? It went to Ukraine. So that's another $21 billion for Ukraine. Realistically, that's what it is. That's another $21 billion. What difference does it make if I spent it last year or if I spent it this year? All of that stuff went to Ukraine. So what do? I'm not giving Ukraine $21 billion. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take $21 billion worth of stuff in our arsenal. We're going to then send that to Ukraine. But certainly, we're not giving them the 21 billion. That doesn't count to the other money we're giving them. Then we're going to take 21 billion and restock our stuff. So that's just another 21 billion for Ukraine. You know what you do after that? You give all that stuff to Ukraine, and then you throw another 21 billion to restock the arsenal. It's a shell game that the government plays. They give stuff away, and they say, we're not giving it to Ukraine and Israel. That's 21 billion to Ukraine and Israel. You give them the stuff in your cupboard, and then you pay. For Israel and Ukraine. That's all it is. Or it's money that's already been spent for Israel and Ukraine, and you're replacing it. And they'll do it over and over and over again. 34 billion to expand the naval fleet with more shipbuilding. 34 billion. The war machine. Now that's 34, 21, that's 55, and 75 billion right there, thrown to hell. I mean, you're restocking your arsenal. I don't say you don't need your arsenal restocked, but if you're an empire and all you're doing is war, then your arsenal ain't going to be around long, is it? So that's half of the 450 billion. Who the hell knows where the other half is? We don't know. And don't really care. Because why? Because Trump comes in and says, we've got to make some cuts. Guess what? The new budget. Now remember, Trump had to lay people off. We got to cut. We've got to close down the NED and the USAID, which aren't really closed down. We got to close down all of these things, many that aren't really closed down. We'll just move them around. We got to cut. Why? Because the deficit's too high. The budget resolution right now and its reconciliation package, right? they will increase the federal deficit between 3.3 trillion and 5.8 trillion. Well, here's what we know. It's going to be 5.8 trillion plus. If they say, yeah, between 1 trillion and 100 trillion, it's going to be 101 trillion. So let's say 6 trillion. What does that mean? That means that according to this, every month we will have increased above and beyond right now what our deficit is. Every 4 months, we will increase the deficit by $2 trillion. Every 2 months, by $1 trillion. Every 1 month, by $500 billion. So, I've got to come in and we've got to do some changes and we can't afford this and we've got to be more fiscally responsible. We got to lay people off. We got to do this, is increasing the deficit by $500 billion per month. 500 billion a month. That's $125 billion a week. That's what but now understand, that's what the deficit is being increased by. $125 billion per week. So after being told that Trump has got to come in and be responsible, blah, 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 all that, all we get is neoliberalism. That's the neoliberal trap. And that is, when you run a neoliberal machine, it's a neoliberal machine. You're not going to come in and do stuff unless it's neoliberal stuff, because that's the game. Now, let's talk about some other things. Also, the tax cuts that Trump passed in 2017, gigantic tax cuts for of course the rich and powerful, right? For the corporations, the one that's supposed to make things so much better. You see how great it's worked, right? Those are going to be made permanent. And that's a big part of what Trump wants. And that will happen, because those are the tax cuts for the rich. Those are the tax cuts for the donor class for both parties. And the tax cuts for the donor class for both parties will, in fact, be made permanent. I don't care if nothing else happens. That's going to happen. Let's see what else we got. I'm looking through. Here's what's interesting. The 500, so they're going to do, the child tax credit is $2,000, right? They're going to increase it $500 to $2,500, right? Okay. But only through 2028. At the end of 2028, it goes back to 2,000. Okay, and it'll be adjusted for inflation, but it goes back. So they're $500 for the people who use the tax credit. They only get that for 4 years. But Trump's tax cuts from 2017 for the rich are for life. Oh, by the way, they're going to raise the estate tax to 15 million. And then permanently, and then that gets adjusted for the exemption for estate tax goes up to 15 million. So if you leave up to 15 million, there's no estate taxes on that. And rather than being temporary, that stays there forever and still gets adjusted for inflation, which means it'll continue to go up. But the $500 temporary tax credit for the working class, that's only till 2028. And you know that will not be renewed, right? You got SNAP, which is the food stamps, that goes down for about 267 billion over 10 years. Let's see what else we got here. Tax breaks for tips, overtime, and car loan interest, right? Remember that? He wants to get rid of tax breaks for tips. He wants to get rid of tax breaks for overtime, not tax tips. not get rid of them. He doesn't want to tax tips, overtime, and car loan interest, which would be if you buy an American car, right? That expires at the end of 2028. Apparently, there's a $4,000 increase in the standard deduction for seniors. I would imagine that is in lieu of when they said they want to get rid of Social Security tax, right? But those things, the tax breaks for tips, overtime, and car loans, over in 2028. So here's the way it works: the tax cuts for the rich people are forever. The tax cuts for the working class, they only get what, 3.5 years. That's the way it works. They're gonna food stamps, they're going to move a lot of the money down to the states. For instance, the states in 2028, the states will have to pay 75% of the administrative costs. And right now, the states pay half of it. They're going to have to pay 5% of benefit costs, which they pay none of it. So you're going to basically, but here's what you do. And here's another thing that neoliberalism loves to do. If the federal government pays for something, they just simply say, we ain't going to pay for it anymore. The states have to pay for it. And you put the states in a position of having to raise taxes or cut the stuff. So you're just saying, I'm not going to cut it or raise taxes. I'm going to lower taxes. Now the states got to raise taxes or get rid of it. You just passing the buck down to the states, right? And of course, people who don't have money for food get less money for food. And of course, neoliberalism works like this. Rich people are rich because they work hard and they should be rewarded for it. Poor people are poor because they're lazy and should be punished, and they'll work harder. So take all the stuff from helping the poor and they'll work harder. See, people are all rich by decision. It wasn't that you were born a billionaire. It's that you worked hard to become a billionaire. Nobody was ever born a billionaire. And poor people are all poor simply because they're lazy and they don't work hard enough. And all we have to do is take from them, and it'll motivate them to work harder, and they won't be so lazy. Remember, reward the rich, punish the poor. That's neoliberalism. Reward the rich for their good deeds because they're rich. Punish the poor for their bad deeds because they're poor based on bad decisions. That's neoliberalism in a nutshell. We're going to do expanding. We're going to make it harder to get Medicaid, which means more poor people will lose. There's a $700 billion in reduced spending for Medicaid. Just make it harder. You're just find ways to get people off of Medicaid. It looks like over a decade, about 8.6 million less people will have health care coverage. And that's, look, it costs money to get people health care coverage. Right now, the U.S. national debt is about 36 trillion. Is about 36 trillion. The public debt is about 26 trillion. So bottom line, I'm looking at it. So you see where I'm going. That's about 98% of gross domestic product, which even then the gross domestic product means nothing. Remember, GDP came up with its Wall Street bull crap. GDP. Let me give you an example of why GDP means nothing. Because after 2008, when the banks seized people's houses, oh, you can't pay for your house? Yes. I'm going to take it back. So they took your house back, right? So then they said, okay, we've got assets. Now we own this house. We've made money. Then they resold your house again. Oh, we've sold the house. We made money. All the profits that they took from taking people's houses who couldn't pay for it. Now, remember, the government, the bank is selling you a house in 2008. Now you can't pay for the house. The loan defaults. The government reimbursed them. So I get the money for the house. The government said, keep the house anyway. So I'm a bank. I get paid for the house by the government, and I get to keep the house. So I get money in from the government, right? The bailout. I sell the house, and I get paid twice for the house, right? And then what do they say? That's a profit. So the bank now says, man, I made a great profit. The government paid me for the house, and I sold the house again, and I made a great profit. I'm making great profits. The government then counts that as part of the GDP. Wow, look at all of these profits the bank's making. Counts that as part of the gross domestic product and says we're in a recovery. That's why you never felt the recovery, because you didn't get any of it, right? So there we go. We're at 98% of the GDP, including public and private debt. And I don't think that even includes corporate debt. And rising. And that's why we are a neoliberal country. That's why Trump is a neoliberal president. That's why if you become president of a neoliberal country, you're a neoliberal president. And the idea that Donald Trump, now don't get me wrong, and I will say this, when it comes to foreign policy, Donald Trump is doing some things differently. Yes, he's not one of the traditional neocons. He has his own brand of neoconservatism, or maybe he's a different than the neocon. As I've said many times, the neocons have no reverse gear. Donald Trump does have a reverse gear. That's what makes him different. He'll say, hell, this ain't working in Yemen. Let's back out. So he will do some things different. Yet the slaughter continues in Gaza. He doesn't have a way out of Ukraine, because the only way out of Ukraine is to get the hell out of Ukraine. The only way out is to get out. There's no way you can keep one foot in. This ain't the hokey pokey. You don't keep one foot in, one foot out, one foot in, and you shake it all about. No, there's only one way out of Ukraine. And Donald Trump, there's two ways out of Ukraine: to get out or to get put out. And you know what? The Russians are going to put us out, which is fine. But to get out is by your own impetus. To get put out is a humiliation, and the humiliation is coming. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Don't forget, you see everything scrolling across the bottom. If you can afford to, donate to the channel. You see whatever, PayPal, buy me a coffee, which is easy. You just go to buy me a coffee. You see right /Garland NH. I don't know why the hell they put the H there. And it'll say buy Garland a coffee, whatever, how much, $5, how many you want. And you can do it monthly, just like Patreon if you want. And of course, there's Patreon. That's an option. All the rest of the stuff. And if you'll notice, guess what? Follow me on Rockfin, Rumble, stuff like that. And at the end, guess what I got? My P.O. Box. P.O. Box 32, Glen Burnie, Maryland. Feel free if you want to email me a letter, a donation, a book, a magazine, whatever you want. But people have been mailing me all kinds of stuff through my snail mail P.O. box, and that's great. Thanks a lot. Share this on all your social media platforms. Peace. I'm out.